Hey, it's the Sporting Tribune podcast. And usually, when someone joins the show for the first time, we kind of do a speed round and we get to know them. Although people listening right now probably might not know Lindsey, but if you're here in Vegas and you're a hockey fan and you're clicking on this for a hockey preview for the Stanley Cup Finals, then you know Lindsey Brown. And I will just say this for those that don't know, we used to work together. We had a show, The Playmakers, may rest in power. So I'm very excited that because of the Sporting Tribune, we can finesse the systems and get to reconnect for the reunion like a Marvel's end credit scene. Lindsey, how are you?
I'm doing great. This is literally the first time that you and I have been on air together since our show ended. So it's we're in very different places than we were 9, 10 months ago or whenever it was. But I'm really happy that you've landed where you have and I have where I have, and that we're able to come together and talk about this. I mean, it is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, but not when you do sports in Vegas. So, but we gotta grab onto it when it's here.
Well, it's an argument that I've actually been having because the Sporting Tribune's like all West Coast. And I
Yeah.
said that Las Vegas is the sports capital of the world, and people in LA got pissed. And I'm like, listen, I'm sorry, but you guys don't have F1. And then they start talking to me about the Golden Globes and the Grammys. And I'm like, I was talking about sports. But yes, in
Correct.
Vegas, these opportunities come. But before we get into that, just really quick for those that don't know, we're giving you all the plug time in the world, but just let people know as we start, like where they can catch you. Because you're kind of everywhere, Lindsey. These past two
I
weeks, you're
am.
kind of popping, Lindsey.
I'm popping off for sure. I appreciate that. Well, if you're looking to hear me on the radio, I'm on the radio every morning, 7 to 10 a.m. on Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m. here in Las Vegas, or podcasted wherever you find those. And then on the Raider app, like the actual NFL app, which is like mind blowing to me. I'm there every morning, and then I've just kind of been doing a smattering of stuff for our other stations, if it's ESPN Las Vegas or Fox Sports for the Golden Knights, and so got to go to the social medias to keep up with all the places I'm tapping into. But yeah, it's a fun time to be in this sports market right now. That's for damn sure.
No, for sure. And it's funny because I think back to last year, and obviously the Golden Knights missed the playoffs, a season with a lot of frustration, a season with a lot of injuries. And now they're back in the Stanley Cup 2 out of 6 years. One of the more intriguing championships. Like if you look at the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup, like you got one team that's like very good and other teams that are just upsetting people all over the place with South Florida and everything that's going on over there.
Mm-hmm.
But for the Golden Knights, a year of transition, a new coach. Just kind of what's the biggest thing that stands out to you throughout this year that's kind of led to this moment?
Well, I think the hiring of Bruce Cassidy marked a really big change for this organization because nobody was really expecting him to be available. It was a really big shock when Boston let him go last year. You know, Boston had a pretty good season, but they went out in the first round. But what Bruce Cassidy brings out from his teams is a different level of discipline and accountability. And not everybody can rise to that level. I mean, that's why he was kind of let go from Boston, because they have some younger players that he didn't always get along with. But with the Golden Knights and their composition as a roster, and it being made up of a lot of veteran guys, a lot of guys that have been to a Stanley Cup, that have won a Stanley Cup, that have contributed to winning Stanley Cups. I think it was the perfect timing for him to come in after their greatest organizational failure, only because they had never missed the playoffs. Like it's so bizarre to think about that, but I think it's so necessary to have success is for you to fail, and for you to sit with that and chew on it and think about what could have been, and all the things you should have done. And I think that's what they did last offseason, and rest and heal, like you said, to the point of the injuries. But when with Bruce Cassidy here, and I said it to my buddy Eddie, who I sit next to in the press box the day he was hired, I go, this is the best move this team has made. Like this is the guy. And what he's done is that he's got everybody to buy into his defensive system that really forces the opposition to claw their way to the middle. Like, by all means, try to run over our defensive core. That's one of the best in the league. Like, best of luck. And also bring the forwards back into it by making sure guys aren't leaving the zone early, aren't fishing for opportunities at the expense of, your defensive fortitude. And you have to prove that every game, every day. Like, you got to get that internalized. And it took a while for the Golden Knights to kind of get there. But then once you start seeing the results, once you can see that you can get confidence in other ways outside of scoring, sometimes it's breaking up a pass, sometimes it's stripping the puck away from Connor McDavid. Like there's these different ways that you can contribute that lend itself to a healthier brand of hockey. And that's what Bruce Cassidy has brought to this team. And they've all converged on at this point where Mark Stone came back after being gone basically the entire year. You have mid-season acquisitions that I'm sure we'll get into, but everything just kind of fell into place. And when things get gnarly, they rely on their system. They rely on the confidence that the system instills. And that's why I'm not surprised they've gotten to the Stanley Cup. Like a lot of people were picking Edmonton in the second round, and I can understand that because it's all shiny and flashy when you can score goals like that. But they don't know how to play a winning brand of hockey at this time of the year. The Golden Knights do. That's what they were preparing for all regular season long.
And I love your point about failure, because if you look at the spectrum on both sides, you have the Golden Knights, a team that has obviously contended before, and last year was something that they'd never experienced, and they reloaded. And then you look at the Florida Panthers, which is a team that they made the Stanley Cup early on in their franchise, similar to the Golden Knights, but there's been one of the joke franchises in all of sports. But last year, they had such a great year, and they had the guts, or since this is my podcast, they had the balls to blow up the team despite the success and kind of revamp it. But you talked about also some of the offseason acquisitions. Obviously, one of the leaders of the team is Jack Eichel. From my eyes and from what I'm hearing, he's kind of elevated his game. If you could kind of get more into that and how Jack's improved in the postseason in this run.
Jack has been one of those guys that has been anointed from a very young age. He is kind of the best that the latest installment of great hockey players coming out of Boston. And I was out in college, out in the East Coast when he was at BU. Like we were at the same awards banquet. And he's such a gifted offensive player and specifically skater. Like he's very effortless in the way that he skates. He's got very long legs. His edge work is incredible. And if he had been born any other year, or if Connor McDavid had been born any other year, he would have gone number one overall. But it was Connor McDavid. And Connor McDavid is this hockey Jesus that everybody continues to worship because that's what he is. Like we've never seen anything like him. He's a singular talent. But the thing about this league is, as much as Connor McDavid is a singular talent, there are different pockets of talent all over the place because of players like Jack and a lot of the young talent development that's changed over the last 15 to 20 years. And when Jack was in Buffalo, he was thrust into the spotlight early, savior complex, right? Because they're such a bad team. And they gave him the C very early. They gave him the captainship very early. And we know that the captainship in hockey is a very unique distinction that comes with a lot of responsibility. And I don't think he was ready for it. I think there was too much put on him. And in a way, because the team was so bad, they were never really in games that meant anything. And so that allows certain bad habits to fester. I'm not going to back check as hard, or I'm not going to be in this position because I'm going to cherry pick a little bit. And that adds up. Like Jack developed a reputation for a guy that takes shifts off. And when he was traded here mid-season last year for a king's ransom, who, when he hadn't played for months, he had yet to have surgery. But that was a big reason why they got out of Buffalo, is because he wanted a neck surgery that had never been performed on an active hockey player before. And I can understand why Buffalo's like, I don't know about this, especially since they were kind of middling in terms of what their trajectory was. But Vegas brings him in, enables him, says, whatever Jack wants to do with his body, we're going to trust it. We're going to let it go. And he came back that season, played well, despite also breaking his hand. And he was part of that failure too. And this is his first time in the playoffs, which is even more incredible, just based off of what he's been able to accomplish over the last few weeks. And I think it was so important for him to get on the score sheet early in Winnipeg. And that's what he did, because the longer you go without scoring, the more insurmountable that small little thing gets. And he's been on it from the get-go. And just to loop it into the conversation we were having about Bruce Cassidy and the system, like Bruce Cassidy's biggest job was getting through to Jack. And he's been able to do that because Jack is just as hard of a back checker as anybody on this team. Jack is a guy that you can trust in any situation because he has finally made that realization that I was pointing to. I don't just have to score goals to feel good about myself, because there were times this regular season where he wasn't scoring, that you could tell that he was almost apathetic on the ice sometimes. But as you go through those learning progressions and those little mini trust falls as teammates, as coaches, as coworkers, he slowly developed that part of his game, or at least committed to it. And that's what's led to his additional success in the playoffs, because again, you don't have to rely on scoring to get your confidence going. And if the scoring isn't coming naturally, you're just going to start gripping your stick too tight, start banging your head against the wall, maybe taking dumb penalties. And so there's been a real maturation process for him this season, and it's paying off better than I think really any of us truly imagine, because you want to have this idea that if you're going to trade as much as they did, Alex Tuch, Peyton Krebs, like all these big time prospects and players, that you're going to get a return for it. The same type of thing when they go out and sign Alex Pietrangelo in the offseason, give him top dollar. Same thing when you trade for Mark Stone and send him to a max deal. But for it to happen so quickly, and for him to not need a playoff to, like, get his feet wet. We see that with a lot of young players. They'll get pushed
You
around
got
the
to
playoffs
suffer in any sport.
yeah.
You got to suffer before you win.
I was just talking about it on another podcast, and people were asking me about why do people not like the Golden Knights? Like, why is there a bias? I think in the hockey world, there is not just an expectation, a necessity for suffering. Whether that's me playing goalie and taking pucks off the collarbone, or busting something in my leg and feeling weird, to being 8 years old, you just got off the ice from 6 a.m. practice and your feet are so cold that your mom has to sit there and rub them until they circulate. There's a suffering to this game, and the Knights haven't really had to suffer that much. And it's because they went out and got guys like Jack Eichel. So, you're starting from scratch, and you're able to acquire these top level players and ascend so quickly. It's understandable why it rubs people the wrong way, but ultimately you win them back by playing the game the right way. And Jack has learned how to do that throughout this entire season, and has truly elevated his game to a different level, where I just kept thinking all year, I'm like, I need to see something more. I think there's even another caliber to his offensive game. And you could definitely say that now, because he's setting up more plays than he's finishing right now. But that just bodes so well for their future. But I mean, in terms of their immediate future, there's really not a better player going other than him, than in terms of the holistic approach to the game. Maybe not scoring, but everywhere else, he's been an all-star.
And for those listening right now, Lindsey just said that she brought up her goaltending career. For those watching, I know you see the mask right there over her shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
And Aiden Hill's over here pitching a shutout 6-0, the clinch to send them to the cup. Bobrovsky for the Florida Panthers has been phenomenal. When it comes down to the goaltending and looking at both of these teams, who has the edge? Because it's kind of like they both have momentum, obviously, because we're here. They're the final two teams. But for you, who has the edge between them?
Well, I would say Florida has the edge if you want to talk about on any given day whose goaltender is better. Like Sergei Bobrovsky is paid $11 million, I think, a year for a reason. But he hasn't really lived up to his contract, and he wasn't the starting netminder when they started this playoff run. And so he's finally kind of come into his own, kind of reclaiming that ghost of himself that inhibited the playoff run that he went on with the Columbus Blue Jackets a few years ago, when they dismantled the Tampa Bay Lightning and swept them after they had the best season on record until then, at least until this year against the Boston Bruins. And he's such a unique specimen when you talk about the way that he plays the game. He's so aggressive. He drops very quickly. He's just very methodical, but he can get overly aggressive sometimes, and he can get caught outside of his net, where if he makes that first save, that's great, but God help you if there's a rebound, because you got the whole world behind you and plenty of time and space. But Aiden Hill has been unbelievable for the Golden Knights. I mean, they've had so many goalies this year, and it's a true testament to the system that Bruce Cassidy runs, especially in defensive zone, and how goalie friendly it has become, because there's not a lot of extra rebounds. There's not a lot of people that are wide open in front of the net looking to finish those rebounds. I mean, they had some brief periods against Dallas because their forecheck was so good. But for the most part, Aiden Hill and the way that he's built, he's so big. He's not the most mobile guy. He doesn't have the most flexible hips, but he's going to make the first save more times than not. and he's not going to get pushed over by pressure because he's such a big dude. He doesn't like when things are collapsing and everything's going everywhere. Like he just finds a way to get a piece because there's so much to him. And then when he stays in his butterfly and he stays tall, like he's able to make those glove saves really easily as long as he's calm, as long as he's reading his angles right. And that's where the defensemen come into play where, there you can stand 2 inches to this way or 2 inches that way. That can be the difference between the forward that's shooting on your netminder seeing the whole half of the net and then none at all. And so I think Aiden has done a masterful job of stepping into the role that lots of people could fill, but not everybody could succeed in to the degree that he has. I mean, he has 2 shutouts last round. He had over 93 save percentage. Like, you want to talk about lights out? If you're above 93 and your save percentage, that's money. That's money. I mean, they like sub 90s where it's like, we got to get this guy out of here, this girl out of here. 91, you're like, okay, we could probably win some games. 93 means you're saving some pucks that you shouldn't. And that's exactly what he's offered. And that's what the Golden Knights have needed at different points in the last few weeks.
And just real quick, and first off, I was smiling while you were talking because it has been so long since I've heard you talk about some goalie talk.
Oh, the times. I miss them.
You said the butterfly, and I said, yes,
Yeah.
let's go.
Yeah,
Bars.
let's go.
Hockey bars. Just real quick before we
Bars.
get into your predictions. I do just want to go back a little bit and just double check. When it comes to the Golden Knights and the biggest difference between last year to this year, the biggest key, if I have to say, hey, you can only pick one, it's Bruce Cassidy being the head coach now, correct?
I think so. I think there's also a different depth to this roster. I mean, there's the commitment to the new system, but then there's also the having the bodies and the skill level to be able to pick each other up, because in the past the Golden Knights have got themselves into trouble during the playoffs with scoring, where say Mark Stone's not going or Jonathan Marchessault gets shut down or the power play is not working, and there wasn't really anybody to get that goal and get everybody going. And now you have the likes of Ivan Barbashev, who I think is probably one of the best trade deadline acquisitions of the season, certainly up there for best acquisitions for this team, and what he enables Jonathan Marchessault and Jack Eichel to do, or Teddy Bluger or Michael Amadio. Keegan Kolesar has taken his game to the next level. And so there's a threat at each and every line. They come in waves. Like William Karlsson and Riley Smith on a third line is a joke. It's a joke. It's an absolute, like, it's a no-brainer compared to what they had even in their last Stanley Cup final run when you had Alex Tuch being the force that he is. And so there's not this pressure on their top guys to be everything. And so they're able to go out, play the game that's necessary, do the necessary things, do the little things that we talk about in hockey all the time, and the scoring will come. And so I think that's the biggest difference between the roster, but then in terms of how this team plays, because even if they did have the roster, if they're not playing the right way, it doesn't matter. So yeah, I think it's Bruce.
And now it's time for predictions. My 2 cents. Well, my 2 cents, my whole thing is that not that it's been easy for the Golden Knights, but they've had it much easier than the Panthers. And also just maybe it's because I'm from Cleveland and I'm always rooting for the underdog. But I just think that when you're the 8th seed, your mentality is always like, we need to be on our P's and Q's at all time because we're already at a disadvantage. And then you face Boston in the season that they've had. Like they've had to do all these different things and momentum, and they're on fire and they're feeling themselves. And Matthew Tkachuk and all those dudes, like everyone's on their A game. But at the same time, if you've made it to this point, everyone that's going to be on that ice is on their A game. So with all that being said, it is time for predictions, Lindsey Brown.
Yes.
Where are you going with this?
I think Vegas is going to win the cup. I said that after game 2 against Dallas in the press box. I was like, I think this team is going to win the Stanley Cup, because it was a game that they got dominated basically. And they still found a way to win it in overtime. And that's where there's this meter for them. It's never too high, never too low. And it's the same thing that I was coached to be as a goaltender. I would coach any athlete, any person, because life can really rock your boat sometimes. But they're never panicky. They always know that there's gonna be something to do, more to play. And even if they do end up losing that game, it's washed away. There's a different maturity there. And so I think they're gonna win the cup. I think they're gonna win the cup on the road, because they've been an unbelievable road team all season long. The last 2 series they've clinched on the road. And I don't think so. I picked Knights in 6, and I think Florida is going to be a hell of an opponent. You know, you noted their role that got them there, and they were this close to not making the playoffs, and it wasn't even like in their control. Like they had played so poorly that the only reason they're in here is because the Penguins literally pooped their pants down the stretch. And they beat Boston, and that comes on the back of Sergei Bobrovsky and Matthew Tkachuk, and then they go up to Toronto, who's like feeling themselves for the first time in a generation. So glad they lost. I hate the arrogance.
Knicks
But
vibes, definitely.
that comes at a cost too. Like all of this clawing, all of this us against the world, all of this everything that you got. I mean, we see it in like singular series itself, like with the Boston Celtics or with the Dallas Stars that the Knights took care of in 6. Like it's you could go back to the well every night, but that doesn't mean that the water is going to be there the same height that was before. And so they're also dealing with a 10-day layoff, the Florida Panthers. Like they swept the Hurricanes, and they've been chilling. And they're going to the rink, and you're doing the best you can to stay sharp. But that's going to count for something, especially in goaltending, like timing and the way that Bobrovsky plays. The dude loses 20 pounds of water weight every game. Like it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I'm like, I wonder how much I lost when I was playing. But they're going to be a really tough opponent because both of these teams are a unique definition of a team of destiny in a way. But I just think top to bottom, the Golden Knights are deeper. They have the motivation of missing the playoffs last year, and they have the foundation that they've laid all regular season. Like nobody's been picking this team. Nobody's giving this team respect. Everybody was talking down the stretch of the regular season. Edmonton's on fire. LA's on fire. They had unbelievable records. Like I think Edmonton lost 1 game since March through the playoffs. But did the Golden Knights ever give up their spot? No, they did not. No, they did not. They kept pace. And so that in a way, the Golden Knights are an underdog. Maybe not in the way that is defined by everybody else or by betting and everything else. But people do not expect them to be here. And I think that's a good thing because they've been crushed by expectations in years prior. And so I really like their chances. I think they take it in 6 on the road, but if it goes 7, I wouldn't be surprised either.
This has to be like the most jealous, like the NHL fan bases that aren't in the Stanley Cup have ever been, because they're like, Florida doesn't have real fans.
They don't deserve it.
Vegas does. They just got here and they took all our players when the team was created. It's kind of funny. We got weird championships this summer because people don't really, I mean, I guess people love Jimmy Butler, but people don't watch Denver Nuggets. It's going to be a weird time, but it's going to be a great time. Before we get you out of here, I do want to say this on air because I texted it to you and I told you before we started. But with the hockey world here, I am so happy that the hockey world is going to go to you. You talked about doing podcasts, and everyone's going to get the insight from you because, Lindsey, when it comes to the Golden Knights, there's no one better that covers the team, which is why I asked you to come on the show. So, number one, as a friend and as a former coworker, I love you and I'm incredibly proud of you. And I can't wait for you to cover this Stanley Cup. And if you didn't believe, I once had to fill in by myself because Lindsey was like having dinner with Golden Knights executives or something. So I had to do the show by myself, and Lindsey left me a note in the studio before I got in. Oh, it's 2 because of my Zoom feature. Can we get it? Can we get it? No, it's but it'll focus on my face.
You gotta unblur yourself.
That's weird. I don't want to. There's inappropriate things in the background.
You just
but it
tweet
says,
a picture out, socials.
You are going to do great because you already are. And Lindsey, so are you this Stanley Cup. Thank you so much for joining us, friend.
Of course, anytime. Love you.
Heart signs. Bye.
Bye.